The holidays look different this year for so many of us. With the loss of loved ones come changes in how we approach the holidays, and navigating that grief can feel impossible this time of year. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Regeter, and today I'm joined by a clinical psychologist, applied neuroscientist, and the author of Healing in Your Hands and Keep Breathing, Dr. Kate Truitt. In this episode, Dr. Kate shares tools we can use to navigate grief and trauma this holiday season, like allowing your emotions to exist, fostering a sense of community, and making time for self-compassion. Dr. Kate, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited for our conversation, but before we begin, I just want to check in. How are you really?
And I love how you start your podcast with that question. It's such an endearing and important question to invite us all to come home to ourselves. I'm tender today. I'm feeling really gentle and tender. And I know that's a part of the conversation we'll be having. How are you really?
Oh, I love that you're feeling gentle and tender today. I am coming off of a very difficult, 2 weeks. So today I'm feeling like shaky in a good way. Whereas I was shaky in a breakdown, not able to really catch my breath for 3 days straight. So I'm transitioning to being excited to breathe again, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but grad school, exams, end of semester, holidays coming up, everything feels like so much constant, just
Absolutely.
overwhelm. And my body and brain shut down for about 3 days of full-on breakdowns. And then today I woke up and life was good and I was excited. I had podcast to record. So right in this moment, I'm great.
I love that. And I'm so appreciative of the authenticity that you bring to these realities and the permission to, yeah, we break down sometimes. And
Yeah.
especially in moments of overwhelm. And the holidays carry a lot of weight in so many different ways, whether they be, personal and intimate to our own life journey or just the social, cultural expectations and demands. There's a lot of pressure around this time of year.
There is. I was sitting with one of my friends recently and we were like, let's go for a walk. And late at night, all the holiday lights, it was the first time we were seeing all the Christmas lights come out. And we were just I love the holidays, like the decorations of it, like the whole premise of it. But so much happened around the holidays that it feels so difficult. My actual holiday thing lately has been instead of like a Christmas present, I'll ask my parents to like get me a book. So this year your book is the one on their Amazon list to have for the holidays to keep breathing. Because family time can be very overwhelming for me. So having something to just escape to that can actually help me get through that moment has been very helpful. But we were going for a walk, all the lights, and all of a sudden it like brought me back to years before where it was the first holiday without someone and I felt like I couldn't breathe. And I was like, I can't believe so many years later I still feel this. And all it took was cute lights on the building.
Right. I know. And those sensory cues they can be so tiny and in terms of what we're experiencing in the moment of the life journey, but to our brain, they feel so big.
They do.
And they pull us back into the past, which then for me can often feel like an avalanche. It's
Yeah.
like everything just comes falling right after that, and I'm back in the grief. I'm back in the loss. And I
Yeah.
reflect that even so many years later. It's like, "Oh, here we are again."
Exactly. And having that on top of, like you said, there's the stress and pressure of the holidays. I mean, it can be as something that feels as simple as, oh, what do I bring to the dinner? So, like, what do I buy some of the gifts? Oh, what are they buying me? Is it good enough in comparison? Oh, how do I navigate this conversation? Because everyone wants to ask me about my career, who I'm dating, my social life, whatever. So many pieces happening. And then on top of that, the trauma and grief coming in. It's a very difficult, I would say, like, month or 2 months to really get through.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and it really is a month or 2 months because it's
Yeah.
like we start prepping. I feel like we navigate past Halloween and then all of a sudden it's Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and rolling into the new with the new year coming upon us. and all of the songs and all of the memories, or putting up the Christmas tree with the ornaments, or whatever it might be. I mean, bringing out any holiday decor, regardless of the religion, or again, the pressures that we carry. So our brain is so sensitized to these experiences and
It
loves to reminisce about the hard stuff.
does, and it's so hard to find, like, how to bring the old memories in, like, a way that feels like warm and good. A lot of times we kind of live I know we haven't touched the ornaments at my grandparents. We used to every year like take out the ornaments and put them on the tree. Everyone has their special ornaments. We haven't touched them since the passing of my grandfather and my uncle. It's been about 5 years, and every year, like holidays, Christmas, it feels so weird just seeing a Christmas tree. I'm like, you feel it. It's like, how do we learn to bring back traditions that used to be so joyful to
Mhm.
something that feels so heavy?
Yeah,
Balance.
yeah. That I talk a lot with my patients and in the trainings that I run about navigating both the bitter and the sweet with loss, and the complexities of that, especially when loss is so traumatic. And I know a little bit of your story, having listened to your podcast, and my story is fairly public about being widowed by somebody who died of an accidental overdose a week before our wedding. And 10 years together, 10 years of traditions and celebrations and life shared, and then just gone. And the reconciliation of what was so precious and sweet within the trauma of the loss can feel really complex to do. And it's so important to even honor that, and holding the space for the journey of the family of, when do we feel safe to bring out this part of Christmas? How do we also honor the joy and the experience of that person when they were still walking amongst us, when they were still breathing and being in the space in a way that is really loving and kind? And all feelings are welcome. That's the one thing I always say about grief, is all feelings are welcome, because it softens, but when we have loved and then lost, the grief is a sign of the love.
It's so true. And it's so hard to remember that all feelings are welcome. A lot of times it feels like, oh, we're moving on without them if we're suddenly happy and things are okay. And it's like, oh, we forgot.
Hmm.
I know for me, I tend to be so my family, my mom, she cries a lot more like with people versus I cry more separately. So when we're together for a holiday, she starts crying. I feel like the anxiousness inside my chest, and I feel like I want to run. And I feel like, oh, I should want to hold her, but I'm like,
Mm.
I grieve differently. I grieve separately. She grieves in community.
Yeah.
So I know that's always hard. It's just like, why am I running? Why can't I be there and be that person? It's
Mm.
difficult when you grieve differently too.
Hmm. And so, what do you give yourself permission to be or do in those moments, Francesca?
I actually allow myself to escape for a minute, to take some deep breaths and bring myself back to the present moment
Love it.
so that I know like I'm physically safe. It feels like I'm not in that moment in my chest, but
Yep.
I'm physically safe. I'm okay. I can go sit there and be with her and talk about it instead of it's so hard to watch my mom cry. So I try to like sit and like let's talk about a memory and then kind of experience it together instead of me for a while it was just me bolting, like cry on your own. It's just not what I meant to
Mhm.
do, but that's kind of what was happening. And now like
But it's okay. I mean, that's Amy the amygdala, right? That little survival part of our brain saying, this feels really overwhelming. And a really solid escape mechanism is obviously to get out. It's one that has been around for 300 million years, which is how long our amygdala has been around. So these experiences of grieving in community versus I need to get out when I feel overwhelmed, those are different adaptive responses that our brain has, that our amygdala has. And so that permission to say, okay, I'm going to step away, regulate, and then enter back into the space when you've come home to yourself is so loving and kind. And also honoring of the loss and the grief journey that you've been on. That's really powerful.
It is, and I think for so long because conversations like this aren't always held about grief and about the loss, for so long I felt like, "Oh, I'm a terrible person that I can't just, like, be there in the moment." But when you learn more about, like, "Oh, why is this panic happening? Where is it coming from? How can I regulate myself in the moment and get through and know that I'm safe?" Because if my body feels like it's not safe right now and my body and my brain are no matter how much I want it to be different, if I don't understand what's happening and it's very overwhelming, it becomes very, like, self-blame for something that I'm not understanding and not in any control of. So, being part of conversations and getting to learn from people has helped make the holidays less about all the things I'm doing wrong and about all the ways that I can, like, survive through my community and with the people around me.
Yeah. Well, talk about self-compassion, right?
Learning.
Yeah. Well, and self-compassion is a skill. So often we think about compassion as being this really organic thing that we should be able to extend to ourselves. And Dr. Kristen Neff, who's one of the world's foremost experts in self-compassion, repeatedly iterates that compassion towards another human is a part of our biology because we need each other, as you just highlighted, to survive. We don't actually have to be nice to ourselves to survive. So learning to have that self-compassion, especially in these larger dynamics like the holidays where there's pressures and especially when there's trauma wrapped into the holiday season, which for so not just around grief and loss, for so many people, the holidays had a lot of trauma wrapped around them. The expectations, neglect, people using too many substances. So, being alone, isolated. It's one of the hardest times of the year. And that isn't really spoken about as much as it needs to be. And all of that stuff has grief inside of it. And I know for myself too, I go into that. Why am I not doing this right? Why am I not showing up in the way I want to? Why am I feeling like I woke up this morning just feeling really tender and vulnerable and going, but I'm a psychologist. I'm a neuroscientist. I should know better. No, no, no. Those are not real things. What's real is, oh, I'm a human.
I love how you bring that part too, because a lot of times we think, oh, well, I should know better to not feel this way. And we're humans. And like
Yeah.
we're humans, it's normal to experience the range of emotions and experience the messiness and joy and good and bad of life, the ups and the downs. And a lot of times we think, oh, well, I should know better. I know about this, so I shouldn't go through this. And we can have as much awareness and knowledge as we want, and it's still human emotions. And we have to allow ourselves the grace to be human.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is a big reason why I wrote my memoir, Keep Breathing, because I quote unquote knew I was an expert in traumatic stress and resilience. And I still developed really severe traumatic grief and then prolonged grief disorder after my fiance died. And I'd already been through so much trauma treatment, plus being somebody who studied and researched this extensively. It didn't protect my brain. And I think in a way, Francesca, it actually made things harder for me because I quote unquote knew better.
Yeah.
I knew what should be happening, but I couldn't do it. I was in the quicksand of trauma. I was in the quicksand of bereavement and grief. And so as you were just sharing yourself, like I was just beating myself up for it. Like, get it together, Kate, as opposed to going, oh, baby girl, yeah, this is really, really hard. And it's still hard 15 years later sometimes. And that's okay too.
It's really, really amazing how I want to say, as you're studying, like clinical psychology and to be a therapist, a lot of times we're taught not to talk about our own mental health, to not be very vulnerable and open up. And to see someone actually have the knowledge, have the training, be that expert, and go through it and talk about it makes such an impact for so many because a lot of times people look to someone else, especially if you're in therapy, right? You're looking at your therapist and they wouldn't go through that, right? Like it's so
Oh,
easy.
no, we do,
We
as we
do.
know, as you know too.
Exactly. in these conversations and being so vulnerable as someone who's like, I know it all. Everything I'm supposed to know. I've been through this, and yet
Mhm.
here I am going through it alongside you. And like, I genuinely, I think makes it so much closer as someone who's then going to therapy, knowing that human too, and that we're really in this together.
Yeah, I really appreciate that reflection. And I remember early in my training being on the side of, being in the chair, my clients on the sofa, and really wanting to connect and be human with them, and knowing in my training that that wasn't what we're supposed to do. And then I had some really phenomenal supervisors who, and especially I started working in hospice, but even amazing supervisors prior to this. But I remember specifically working in hospice, and my supervisor, Dr. Diane Bunker, she was incredible. She was a lieutenant, a clinical psychologist, and a nun. I mean, talk about like a well-rounded, existentially beautiful being. And she pulled me aside and she's like, Kate, you just got to be you now. Yes, you are also a psychologist, and in this space, you're walking amongst those who are breathing their last breaths. This is the chance to be with them, and that's an honor. And it just started to change the way I was experiencing the possibility of therapy. And how do we start breaking the barriers of, you know, doctor, patient, their psychotherapist who has it all together. And we're all messy. And that's okay. And it's beautiful. And we can still show up and do really powerful work with our clients. But I know I do better when I'm also allowed to be a little messy sometimes. Because when I get in my perfectionistic, and you've shared on your podcast so courageously about your perfectionism, and I resonate so deeply with it. I'm like, I hear you, girl. I'm not home when I'm in that space. I'm dissociated.
It's I started practicum this semester and starting to see clients, and everyone's like, appropriate self-disclosure, appropriate self-disclosure. So
Real, which is
it
real.
is very real. So I've been like, okay, what does that mean? Because
Mhm.
it's different to everyone.
Yeah.
So I remember sitting in with one of my clients who just was not opening up at all. It was like, I don't know what that emotion means. I don't know what that emotion means. So we played a game where like a ladder of emotions, you roll the dice, whatever emotion, we would take turns. You had to say what an example when we felt that emotion, um, and how we, I guess, expressed that emotion,
Mhm.
and then how we coped with it if it was perceived as more of a negative emotion that we needed support for. And then we had to reflect it back to the other person. And it was the first time that my client was like, oh, well, I guess I do feel that emotion in this, or I felt it like that too. And I was like, "See, all because I shared as well." I was like, and it was still within. So it was learning so
Mm.
I feel like it's so difficult because there's not a lot of conversation on what is considered appropriate self-disclosure because for so long it was like nothing. And now it's like, okay, a little bit appropriate. But
Yeah.
what defines appropriate? Someone let me know. So it's like learning as you're going. As a baby therapist is what I call myself. It's difficult, but I'm learning.
Yeah, well, and it's like training wheels, and especially as a baby, I used to call myself a baby therapist. I love that. It is so much like training wheels and finding our own rhythm in the space. And as you're sharing that story, I remember after my partner John died, going home for my first Christmas and being with my parents, and they're not very affectionate people. I grew up in the Midwest. We did not talk about emotions. There was very little physical touch that was a positive experience in the house, and really just wanting a hug, and having an internal conversation about appropriate disclosure with my mom around a hug. So it was like, and catching myself being like, wait, this is how I engage with my own clients. And then just walking up to her and just leaning on her. And she put her arm around me. And then I was just like, and this is not something we do necessarily in the therapy room, but just realizing, wow, I've been so indoctrinated by my family system growing up that in some ways that actually works for me as a therapist. But how do I give myself the space to be affectionate with my family and create safety around that in general? And it's so interesting to explore these dynamics. And now in the field of psychotherapy, especially with EMDR, like we're bringing in, we do tapping now, and there's a lot more somatic work and inviting people to be in their bodies, which I think in a way is a permission for us as therapists to also get into our bodies and ourselves in the room. And that's really cool and exciting because it didn't used to be that way.
It is so well, I'm so happy that I'm entering the field at this time.
Me too.
Right? 'Cause I don't know if I would have been great outside of this time. I love the vulnerability. I love the connection. And I think that it's so difficult to I know for me growing up being in therapy, it was so difficult to feel connected to someone who was sitting so far away, who was dressed
Yeah.
perfectly and sitting straight up like this. Yep, jotting down notes, asking me a question and going, and writing something down.
And how does that make you feel? Well,
So
take it
diff
off.
to feel like what I was saying was making sense. I was like, "Well, does that make sense? Am I saying this right? What are they hearing?" Like, the whole time as a child. So then now getting to be on the other side of it, I'm like, "Thank goodness it's not that way anymore." And I can
Mm,
actually be present. I had one client who this past week was like, the holidays are coming up and something new has happened. Now this is different for me. I don't know what to expect. And I was like, you know what? I feel that going through the holidays too. Tell me about what it used to be like. What do you think is going to be different? And just talking about that, I'm like, you know what? When it was different for me the first time, I asked myself these questions, or I looked for things like reading a book that might help me escape. Do you have something that helps you escape in those moments? And it was just such like a beautiful conversation of, "Oh, you've been there too. You're not just telling me what you think." It's like, "Oh, you feel it too, so maybe I'm not alone in this. Maybe it's not someone just pathologizing me, it's someone hearing me."
yeah. Well, and that takes it back to being human and that normalization, which is about that's how we break the stigma, which I know is what this podcast's all about, is how do we break the stigma and allow for the messiness of all of it, whether we're in the depths of the darkness with some of the hardest, darkest moments of humanity, or navigating change. Because as humans, our brains are so bad at change. We hate change. And I think that's one of the pitfalls of the holidays that I see so often is the expectation of this is how it's supposed to be. And then when something changes or is different, whether it be loss of, we just lost my little dog, Tinkerbell, and you'll read about her in the books. And she was almost 16 years old. And she was my last remaining living connection to my partner, John. And so this is the first holidays without her. And it was so poignant noticing her little feet not pattering around or not having to say, don't give her the turkey, guys. Like just those little micro reminders of, oh, my baby girl's gone. The holidays are different. And the gift you gave your patient there, it just was really beautiful of saying, yeah, me too.
It's yeah. Oh, I'm sorry for the loss. It's so hard when things are constantly changing, and like you said, we don't like change as humans. My biggest pet peeve is my dad's like, "Oh, just adapt. Everything's always changing." I'm like, "You can't really sit here and tell me that you're so happy that things are constantly
And you wonder why I have anxiety.
changing." I can't do
Yeah.
this.
That's what I tell my dad when he says it. I'm like, and you wonder why I have anxiety, Dad. You wonder why.
Right? It's like those small changes, and I know so for me, a very specific example coming up this holiday season is so I up until like September this year, I was flying back and forth from Florida to California every week. So I was spending California when I was in school on school days, and then otherwise I was with my grandmother who has Alzheimer's
Yeah.
taking care of her.
Yeah.
So now this is the first time that she's in assisted living. And the place we were living in was sold. Like it actually closes December 20th, just before Christmas. So it's like everything that coming home is different. It's not me with my grandparents. Christmas was when we would I slept over there the night before Christmas Eve every year since I was 4. We would
Mm.
watch The Grinch and drink hot chocolate every day, and I could quote the beginning of The Grinch, the opening, because I loved it so much, doing that with them, and cappuccinos and dark chocolate. And it's like my grandfather's not here. Their house, my uncle lives in it, and it just looks and feels different now. The condo that they had that me and my grandmother lived in after isn't there anymore. It's like now she's in assisted living. There's no steady, like, home, right? It doesn't feel like there's
Yeah,
that home there anymore.
yeah, and that's grief. And
Yeah, and it's going to holidays, it's like the entire environment looks so different now on top of she's not who she used to be because even a year ago, she could write the check herself. This year, she's like, "Can you take me to get cash and help me count?" It's like those feel like the world is just it makes it I don't that I don't wanna celebrate the holidays, but it makes it so difficult to want to enjoy it in the way that I used to. And I noticed for the holidays every year, my brother was like, "What are you getting me for Christmas?" And I was like, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm getting to Christmas."
right.
It's so difficult to, like, plan and prep when it's this constant fear of, "Oh my goodness, all of this is changing now. It looks so differently." How do you even begin to prepare to go back into a new normal, a new look, a new shift. I don't even know what to call it anymore.
Well, and especially when we have family members who have Alzheimer's, dementia, and I have people I love deeply in my life who are on that journey as well. It's not even a new normal because we know how that journey unfolds and how
Yeah,
painful and hard it is, and the reliving of their past while we're reconciling the present
yeah,
and trying to envision and create some version of a safe future for them.
yeah.
So there is no structure that we can build underneath that outside of the acknowledgement of constant change.
Yay.
Yeah, I know, so fun. Uh, and I think that's one of the things that makes the holidays so complex for so many of us is because there is the through line of similar ornaments or the same people even. So maybe the environment's different, the Christmas looks different, but oh, but these same people are gathering or not, or the same songs are playing in the grocery store, or Costco's got everything or Target's got everything decorated already by, mid-October, right? Like the brain just gets really hit hard by all of these stimuli, and we're holding the emotional tenderness of that, of not just the tangible loss of actual death, but the loss of what used to be what we call the ambiguous grief of we're still living in the relationship, and yet it's not the same, and we know it never will be again.
Exactly. Never
Hard.
it's hard. The
That's hard.
long journey, and it feels like it's constantly changing, and then there's days where it's like, you wake up and you're so excited that it's December and it's almost Christmas and everything's great, and then it's like 2 days later, feel like your body, everything was taken out of you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lot of times it's like, I don't know why. When things like that happen for you, how do you kind of, I guess, deconstruct what's happening and figure out how to move
Yeah.
through that moment?
Yeah. And it's normal, which is a weird thing for so many people to know, is that those waves are really, really normal. Is when we have a stimulus reminder, like with the Christmas lights, as you shared when we first started chatting, that our brain goes into this heightened state of, a grief response or a grief plus trauma response, even. And it is mind body, as you're describing. It's not just something, it's not thoughts, it's thoughts. And I know for me, it often shows up as just really severe fatigue. And then my thoughts catch up to it and go, oh, I'm having a grief wave, or feeling like a raw nerve and the fatigue. And then I'm like, got it. Something activated me, and trying to muddle my way through it. For me, the best thing I can do is find that self compassion. I mean, I literally do that. I go, baby girl, it's okay. It's fine. We're going to get through this. This is hard. Oh, I do. I'm very spiritual. And so I'll, pull on. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to hold something. Let's do that. Something grounding. How do I get myself back into my body and give myself permission to be with this? And then, particularly when it is a grief wave, finding some of the sweetness within the bitter. What is something meaningful? What is something I can connect to? And you can see even behind me, there's a lot of kind of random nuanced items. But like that's a shell that's in the shape of a rose that when I was having a really hard time, I was walking on the beach and there I just looked down and it was sticking up out of the sand like a rose. And my John would always leave me these little roses when we were together for 10 years. And so now I just go, he's here differently. And just finding those little micro moments for all the I've lost many, many amazing people in my world, as I know you have as well. And so it's finding those micro moments.
It is. And that's something I've been slowly learning to do, especially with the holidays. My grandparents are like my entire world.
I dare that. Yeah.
I, my entire childhood, like any free moment, I was like with my grandparents, my whole world. So not having my grandfather, it's been, I think this is year 6 of him not being here. And that's like, it feels like forever ago, yet it feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
And there's days where it's like he's not here and it's okay. And then there's days it's like, oh my goodness, why are we not watching The Grinch together? Like, why am I getting ready to bake cookies and not annoying him that he has to make them with me? Or studying for finals even looks different this time of year. Usually it's mental breakdowns on FaceTime with my grandmother while she's listening to me like read my notes. And now it's a mental breakdown on FaceTime with my grandmother who's very confused on why I'm crying because
Yeah.
every 30 seconds it's like a new experience. So it's 30 seconds of rediscovering my granddaughter's crying on the phone and I don't know why. Thus, not being able to have mental breakdowns on the phone during finals to my grandmother. That's a very different experience because that's what gets me through. If I wasn't a perfectionist and I was able to accept that I didn't have to be perfect, maybe I wouldn't have those breakdowns and we'd both be happier, but baby
Ah,
steps.
gentle, gentle, gentle.
Gentle.
That's fine. Gentle. Yeah. And I know my version of that. I just had one of those moments last night with somebody, and it's these little quiet moments of going, this is different. This is different forever now. And that's where the allowance for the feelings, which is so much easier said than done, I know. So it is really hard. Now, who can you have one of those breakdowns with when sometimes your perfectionistic parts get a little more verbal than they ought to be?
I have my one best friend Sam, who she takes the brunt of all my breakdowns. She gets them now, and she's so good with it.
Mm,
She is so good. I for a while I tried my dad, and he was like,
not a
"Princess,
fan.
the world's not ending. If you get 100 or if you get a 0, the world will not end. The world does not care about your grades." I'm like, not helping. Yes, it does. Um, but my best friend Sam, she'll sit there and she'll listen. She'll make me laugh. And she always knows, like, do I need to laugh? Do I need to be validated? Do I need to just sit in the tears? Like, somehow she knows she's
Good
the
gift.
world's greatest. Love you, Sam, if you're listening.
Love you, Sam. Thank you.
But it's so important, right, to find people who can offer kind of that support that we're still looking for. And just because that person isn't here anymore doesn't mean that a lot of the gifts that you shared together doesn't still get to exist. And having someone who you could just call and talk to doesn't have to go away. It just looks differently. And it's really hard to get to that. But I've been so grateful that Sam, she's my everything, always helping me out. Oh,
Yeah. Well, and I find that even, because I have so many individuals that I've walked with, and I myself, I've experienced severe social phobia. And that was what brought me into the field of neuroscience to begin with, was like, why are people terrifying all the time? And having, at the time, I had a kitty cat, and I would talk to my cat, and I would feel completely bonkers, but I feel like I had some pretty deep existential conversations with her. Right? Her name was Crisco, literally after the vat of Crisco in our cupboard. Because I was like, I don't know what to name this cat that I just rescued. Opened a cabinet, there was the vat of Crisco, and that was her name. And so it's having anything or anyone that we can connect to and have that relationship with, and finding those little spaces to hold that for ourselves, and then bringing that into our own bodies and saying, oh, and I can be gentle and kind to myself. And that's where, Amy the amygdala came from, is I started having conversations with my Amy the amygdala. And that's where I coined that term of just being like, Amy, what's going on, girl? When I'm 20 years old, just trying to figure out what's going on with Amy because, man, she's having a hard time. Man, she's really wanting to just take a hard left. And I really need to go right because that right is life. So let's talk to her about it and write about it. It is hard. And having a Sam is wonderful. And knowing that for those of us who are in those moments of our lives where we don't have a Sam, there's a lot of other ways we can find that connection too, because connection is so important.
It is so important, and it's finding it what's right for you in that moment. I will say I've known Sam since I was 4, and it's been about a year and a half of me actually like calling her in tears. For the first few years, it was just I felt like I had to do everything alone. I landed myself in the psych ward and literally tried to just like keep it all inside and not and didn't need anyone. I was gonna figure it out myself because I'm an adult and I'm strong and whatever I like to tell myself. And then one day I was just sitting with Sam and we were just like up really late watching movies and she was like, "Why did you never call me back then?" And I was like, "I don't know. I felt like I had to do it alone." And then we made a deal. If I called her crying, no matter what she was doing, she'd make sure that I was okay. And she's held on to that. So sometimes it's like a check-in of, do you need me to drop everything and come here? Or do you need a few minutes of let's sit on the phone? Because realistically, she can't always drop everything to run to me. So now it's like that level of check-in. What do you need in this moment? How can I be there? And it's made it go from psych ward was the option to now I have someone to call. And it took a long time, but knowing that finding that where you need it, when you need it is so helpful. I hope everyone one day has a Sam, my best friend in the entire world. I feel like I brag about how amazing she is all the time. All the time, I'm like, this is my best friend Sam, like showing people pictures. Just it's really nice when you have someone or you have something. And sometimes it could be crying to a pet and having just a pet to snuggle with and hold. It could be sitting there with a stuffed animal. It could be anything that just gives you that reassurance that you're not alone and that something is there for you and with you.
And that's where there are also so many wonderful groups that and community spaces. I know after my fiance died, um, I made a pact with myself that I had to do at least one new thing. And this is when I had already developed really bad PTSD. And I was like, I have to do one new thing, and I don't know how to do that. So I went on Meetup. And so I would do one new thing through Meetup a month. And it was really phenomenally terrifying. And I had a lot of really interesting and unique experiences. Like I did a flash mob. I met a lot of really cool people, and I was a part of a flash mob, which I never would have imagined. But it was just a way because I felt I'd lost so much of myself when he died because we were pretty codependent. When we just, it was John and Kate, Kate and John, we met when I was 18 and 10 years together. That's pretty formulative. And so finding those little ways that for each of us that work to connect, and especially in this time of the holidays where there is this incredible pressure to be like, what are you going to be with your family? It's like one of those regular conversations that people will start with. What are you doing for the holidays? And it's for those who don't have some place to go or something to do. It's like, well, what can we do? Oh, how about going to volunteer at a soup kitchen and being with the community that way? How about something else if that's what the soul and the spirit is calling for? It's also perfectly okay to be like, I give myself permission to really just be with my kitten and hang out. And that's cool too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
meeting yourself where you're at.
exactly.
I remember there was one Christmas where I didn't go to like the family thing. I was like, I can't do it. I walked the street of like there's this street in Florida called Las Olas where there's all these restaurants. And I was like that Taylor Swift song. I walked down the street and just looked in the window and watched all these families having dinners together in all these restaurants for miles and just cried. And I was like, that was all I could handle that year was seeing it from the outside and like seeing that the joy of the holidays still exist, but I wasn't ready to feel it yet. So it was like
Yeah.
my way of getting through. There was a year where I volunteered at a food bank. I was like, I need to like do something to feel like I'm helping others. and to not feel stuck in my own head. And like, even though it feels like this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, it's going to be okay. I still have things that I'm very grateful for, and not to minimize it, but to remind myself of how it's not the end, even though it feels like the end, and how I could hopefully help someone else who maybe feels like this is the end have something. And that was a really great place to volunteer. They always need volunteers, especially the holidays.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's fine meeting yourself where you are, and it might look different every year. I now go to family events. I this year this year I didn't even hide at all. I made it out the entire time. Year before, I hid and was reading in a room up until it was time for dinner, had dinner, cleaned up, and then left after everything was clean. So this year, I made it Thanksgiving without hiding at all, which was amazing. Takes time.
It takes time, and each year can and will look different as the journey evolves. And I just love the permission that you're modeling for everybody. It is so real, and it's the waves, and as life continues to unfold, it's how do we, as you're beautifully sharing, meet ourselves exactly where we are within the mess,
Yeah.
and knowing that when things are feeling a little darker than other times, what are the ways that we can find nourishment and help ourselves create a space so that we're not making a permanent choice to a temporary solution, even though in those experiences it can feel so permanent and so dark. And I know from my own journey how real that is. Finding community through a food bank or going down and finding ways to contribute, or I've gone and wrapped gifts before for children and, helped pick up toys and done toy drives. It's little micro moments like that, or going to the animal shelter and donating time walking dogs. There's so many little ways that we can find to fill ourselves up that are low commitment, which is good for a grieving or even a brain that's struggling with really severe depression. But just give us little droplets of nourishment in a time where the world is showcasing together.
Define what together is for you. That's right at that moment. And it's, again, I feel like I just always want to emphasize that it's so different. It can be different from day to day, and that's
Mhm.
okay. I think that there's this I love watching the Hallmark Christmas movies. I really do.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
But the journey is always the same, right? It's like
Yeah.
something upsetting happens, something very difficult, and then it's like, but they seem to get through it pretty well. And then they meet someone, and then everything changes, the whole look of Christmas, and everything's better. And then it's like, I love watching.
One tiny hard thing at the end, but they figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. And then in life, it's like, I might have one of those days where I'm like, oh, like everything's feeling okay today. And then it's like,
Yeah.
actually, no, it's not anymore tomorrow. It's not as straightforward and linear as the Hallmark Christmas movies. I think for so long, it felt very isolating because watching movies this time of year and TV shows, and then going on Instagram and seeing everyone's posts and reels and all the highlights and the fun. And then it's like, why can't my brain live in that fun for more than an hour or for an entire week or make it through the day? Why is it so different for me? So recognizing that as much as I love the movies and love the TV shows and love watching everyone online, it's allowed to look different for me on a day to day, a minute to minute, a week to week. And that's okay. And what I need today and what community looks like today may be different than tomorrow. And that doesn't mean that I'm not still growing. It doesn't mean that I'm not still moving along. It just means that I'm human, and it's who I am today may change a little bit tomorrow. I may need something different, and that's okay.
Yeah. And the allowance for that is growth in of itself. So going back to your question of how do I ride those waves, it's just giving myself permission to know that I don't have to be perfect. We had this term growing up that no matter how bad things got, my mom would say, you just got to show well. As long as you're showing well, it's fine. And taking off the I got to show well hat and really living in that space now. Before it got taken off because of severe depression and anxiety and everything I went through on my journey, which you'll read about in the book. It's pretty messy. But now it's like, it's okay to, again, go back to be messy, and the allowance of that of yesterday was a really great energetic day, and I would say sparkly. Like sometimes we have those days where it's like, this is a sparkly day. And then waking up today and being like, oh, wow, I just feel really tender. and just being like, okay, I'm going to be there. How am I really? Tender. How are you really? You're now breathing a little better than you were a few days ago. Beautiful.
That's so true. It's just giving yourself permission to be as you are and not feeling like you have to hide it for so long. I think the conversation was that fake it till you make it all the time. And in some ways, it may help in certain situations, but you don't have to all the time. You can just show up as you are, and that's okay. And being honest, at least at the minimum, with yourself in that moment can just really help you get through. I know for so long it was like, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine," and I'm saying that to other people, but I'm saying it to myself, and then I'm not, and something small happens, and it felt like everything, and it just brought me all the way down, and had I been honest with myself before, maybe I would have added another self-care practice or maybe not scheduled so many things back to back and gave myself time to breathe in between. It'd have been one small thing that could have been different that may have made the impact not as strong if I was honest. So I think the biggest thing I've learned from the holidays is honestly check in with yourself through all of it. Be there for you.
Well, and the reason the memoir is titled Keep Breathing is because there have been times in my journey where sometimes the act of breath was all I felt like I could do. And to give myself permission to know that that 1% was still my mind and my body loving me. And that breathing was all I had to do. And it was okay just to keep breathing.
It's so beautiful. It's so true. You are so amazing. As we are wrapping up, where can people go to buy your memoir?
Well, it's in all the major bookstores, and of course, everybody's familiar with Amazon, so you can pick it up there. And then I also have a healing workbook for anybody who wants to go on a neuroplastic journey of brain partnership called Healing in Your Hands. And so you can find that at all the major bookstores too. It's a workbook of healing traumatic stress and building towards resilience and really just coming home to self. So I'm very proud of both of the books. I loved them, and I had great editors, which was an amazing thing. Who are good friends now, which is very cool.
Oh,
And then I know you found me on Instagram. So I'm on all the socials. My YouTube channel is really, really precious to me because it's YouTube Health Approved, which means the NIH, the World Health Organization, have given it a thumbs up as an educational resource. And we do all sorts of educational videos and guided healing exercises throughout the week. So therapy is a privilege, and for those of us who do not have access to therapy, mental health is a human right. And so that's everything that we do on the social media channels is how to make it free.
thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.